I got this Nimbus Oracle 27.5-inch mountain unicycle from unicycle.com, and it's making me really want to get back into unicycling. There's no reason why these things should exist. They're really hard to ride, but if you want to, here's my tutorial on how to ride a unicycle for the first time. Now, it goes without saying the first time you're getting on a unicycle, you should use a wall, a fence, or anything to kind of hold you up, and we'll call this getting on or mounting with assistance. The unicycle is a fixed gear apparatus, which means if the wheel moves, the crank moves, and vice versa. To start mounting with assistance, place your crank perpendicular to the floor, and then put one foot and all of your weight onto that bottom pedal. This way, the unicycle has a hard time moving if all of your weight is on that pedal. As opposed to this, where the pedal is going to move if you put pressure on it. Once your foot is on the bottom pedal, you can bring the seat to you and have you sit on it from here. Make sure it's comfortable and you can adjust whatever you need to adjust. With your crank perpendicular to the floor, one foot on the bottom pedal, and you comfortably seated on the seat, you can start to get on with assistance. Try to get this foot onto this pedal with all of your weight on this foot. You're on. Once you're on, it's probably a good idea to learn how to get off. When you've been riding for a while, dismounting is just stepping off. But when you're a beginner, dismounting is just falling. That was exaggerated. Can you tell? If you can, when you're falling, try to separate yourself from the unicycle. It's easier to step on solid ground than to accidentally step on a crank or a wheel and roll an ankle or fall. Practicing getting off the unicycle might be a good insurance policy when you're first starting. This goes without saying, but it's nice to start off with a wall, a fence, maybe a ladder or a friend to help you on a smooth, flat surface, so nothing rough and nothing sloped. Because of the way we got on with the crank perpendicular to the floor, the first pedal is always super hard, but we'll address that a little bit later. One of the scariest parts to first riding is you need to lean forward. So you're not directly above the wheel, you have to lean forward to go forward. You're gonna notice when you're riding, the unicycle wants to swiggle left and right. A squiggly line, unlike a straight line like a bicycle, is expected for a unicycle. When the crank arm is just past the parallel point, you'll notice its path is down, but also towards you on the vertical axis. This makes the unicycle turn, just as if somebody was pushing your left shoulder, makes you turn to the left. Look at when I turn the cranks holding the unicycle. It's wiggling back and forth for this reason. This makes your path a squiggle rather than a straight line. Go with a squiggle. Move your hips to allow the unicycle to make the moves it wants, because when it comes back to parallel again, it'll correct itself. This will also get you better at turning when you're ready to turn. Because the hardest part in a full crank cycle is when the crank is parallel with the floor, try to count how many cranks you get as a way to gauge your progress. The last thing to learn when learning a unicycle is free mounting, or getting on without assistance of a wall or another person. There are two crank positions to free mount. Both have their pros and cons, so pick your favorite. The first crank position is with your crank perpendicular with the floor. The pro to crank position one is that it's easy to mount because the cycle is steadied by your weight being on the down pedal. The con is it's hard to start pedaling. Your opposite foot has to push tangential to the rotation of the wheel in order to get it started. If your crank is perpendicular to the floor, it's not pushing tangential, it's just pushing down right into the crank arm. And even worse, when you lean forward, your foot isn't pushing down into the crank arm anymore, it's actually pushing the wheel backwards. So it's kind of hard to finesse your way to get the wheel to start moving. There's also a trick here to intentionally roll backwards to get the crank arm in a better position to start, but that's a little trickier. The second crank position is with your crank parallel with the floor. The pro to position 2 is that the issue with position 1 doesn't exist. You're in the most favorable crank position to start riding and get into your groove. The con is it's really hard to mount like this. You sort of have to do that thing where you pretend you're stepping over an imaginary box to get on, since the cycle is not steadied by anything. You also have to put a little bit of pressure on the crank, just enough to make sure it doesn't roll. So it takes a little bit of time to develop those motor patterns. You can also just hop on here, but that's a little riskier and more advanced. I wouldn't recommend that for a beginner. So those are the majority of the major things you'll need to know when learning how to ride a unicycle for the first time. If you have any questions or concerns, please let me know in the comments below, or you have a success story, I would love to hear about it. So good luck, guys, and I'll see you next time. Ho. Ho. My ankle doesn't like that. I'm not adhering to my own standard. Oh God.